Thanks everyone for joining. Today we're going to be presenting on the next era of what we're calling secure connectivity. So Jay, you can go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about us and get right into the meat of things. So today we have myself, Jay, and Jerry. A little bit about myself. I'm Justin Youngblood from Comport. I've been with Comport for about 3 years, leading our security network practices. We have Jay on the call today. If Jay looks familiar, it's because he is. He's been on, I think Jay and I were on a webinar about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, on a similar topic that we're discussing around mobile connectivity. Jay is going to be talking about Aruba's mobile connectivity and kind of changes that have happened since the last time we've chatted, and then some new features and kind of deep dive a little bit further than what we did the last time on capabilities. And then we have Jerry on the line here as well, and Jerry's actually going to do a live demo, which is always dangerous on a webinar, but Jerry's going to go through and actually show a couple unique things. So from a simplicity standpoint, simplicity for the engineers actually making configurations, how easy it is to actually zero trust enable new users, new third-party contractors to get into your system securely. And then the easy point of the actual end user, how easy it is to go to a web top and actually navigate the access they have, and then do a full traditional VPN client too, like think of always on and stuff like that. So the first half we'll be kind of doing some slides, and the back half of this call we'll be doing a live demonstration. And then we will open up for questions at the end if anyone has questions. And then you can also go into the Zoom question and area and ask a question. I'll ask those questions for Jerry, depending on who it's for, and we can keep this an open dialogue if needed. So with that, we'll go on the next slide. I'll give a quick briefing on who Comport really is, if you're not familiar with. So Comport's been a traditional VAR for more than 40 years. What I mean by traditional is not like traditional data center footprint where a lot of ours kind of grew up. And we still do those things today. So anything inside your data center, which is folded out into all your public clouds, hybrid clouds, all that kind of fun stuff. We have dedicated resources in our security stack. So whether you need a vCISO, you need to compare products, you need to mature your platforms in that space. We also have the same for our networking space, whether it's Wi-Fi or campus switches, or I need to do VXLAN bridging across data centers, anything like that. We have a very mature AI practice that was kind of started many, many years ago before even AI existed, kind of scale out computing. And then we have two different people components to it. Our professional services, which is your traditional, we need to deploy a new tool, we need to mature a new tool, we need to migrate from A to B in all the categories I talked about. And then our managed services, which is also very unique, and that can be managed services from an IaaS platform. Hey, I need to get this off my data center, but it doesn't fit into an Amazon or Azure. Can you help me with that? I want to offload a particular workload, whether it's a skill set or platforms. Let's say, hey, I want you guys to monitor all of my firewalls. Or I want you to manage all of my Broadcom VMware. I want you to take on a skill set that my staff doesn't have today. We can handle all those things as well. So with that, I'm going to hand the keys over to Jay, and Jay's going to start us off with how Aruba kind of tackles this end user connectivity while still staying zero trust.
But Justin, thank you for having me back on, and welcome to everyone that's listening. I'm going to keep my bit as short as I can because I'm sure everyone's really come to see Jerry's demo. Hopefully the demo gods are on Jerry's side. But let's kick it off. Okay, so my background before I joined a vendor and went to the dark side is very much customer side. So I started my career playing games for a company called ID Software. I then transitioned into looking after everything on the network in a large Japanese manufacturing company. I did a stint in Formula One for a number of seasons, looking after everything trackside, before going back to a large UK manufacturing company. We had sites all over the globe, 40 plus sites. And that's really where I started to think that we needed to tackle our security in a different way. We historically have let everyone go everywhere on the network, and that opens the door to things like ransomware and insider threats. And I really went on a journey and found this kind of a strategy that we now refer to as zero trust, which is something I'm very passionate about. That led me to find a small startup called Access Security. They then offered me a role to come and evangelize the technology as a whole. And then about 2 years ago now, we were acquired by HPE Aruba Networking to make up the wider portfolio. So on the side, I have what we call side gigs, and it's not dancing on TikTok. I actually host the No Trust podcast. So this is completely vendor agnostic and really brings together people to talk about the business benefits of zero trust. What does it mean in reality? As I said, it's something I'm very passionate about. I've also done some work with the DoD and MOD and with the Cloud Security Alliance around zero trust. So if it's something that you're interested in learning more about from people that are doing it or have done it, then please give it a listen. But let's get started. So the world we live in is very different. It doesn't feel that long ago that we kind of hosted all of our files on a desktop machine under the finance person's desk. But that's pivoted. We now are adopting cloud services more than we ever were before. There's a huge proliferation of IoT and OT devices. And then the pandemic came along and really shifted our workforce. So we've gone from primarily being an on-prem world to now primarily being a hybrid world. And I want to talk about some statistics around this as I go through the deck. But this really started off with a shift to this hybrid work during the end of the pandemic, during the pandemic. So this is a stat from our 2025 SSE adoption report, and we can share the statistics on this. This shows that primarily people were either mostly remote or hybrid. Although the world's changed a little bit in 2025 with slightly more people being in the office, we're still predominantly either fully remote or hybrid. However, this led Gartner to come up with this term that we refer to as SASE. Okay, so SASE is really bringing together networking and security. That's the simplest way of looking at it. Bringing together SD-WAN, WAN connectivity, all of those network functions with security, bolting in what is now referred to as SSE or wider security portfolio. I think the important thing is that combination of networking and security, really starting to embed security in everything we do on a daily basis. Gartner have broadened this scope a little bit, and they're calling it universal ZTNA. That's really the concept outside of just a hybrid worker. That's bringing security on-prem as well. So if you look at the SASE architecture, it doesn't currently really deal with users that are on-prem. It doesn't focus on them when they come on the network. So really, universal ZTNA has taken the concept of ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access, that has become synonymous with replacing VPN. It started to bring that on-prem as well. So it's starting to talk about single user interface, single data lake, single code base, so that it doesn't matter where the users are or what device they're on, you can configure their level of access in a single place. And I think fundamentally that's what's changing the environment we live in today, okay? We have three primary ways of dealing with our users at the moment when it comes to security. Historically, and what I'm still seeing maybe 85 or 90% of organizations doing, is the hub and spoke or castle and moat design. That design is really, I guess, decades old now, 10 years, 20 years or more. It's been around since really the birth of IT. And it really concentrates on the users being inside the castle and the data being inside the castle, and you build in this very good perimeter around the outside. So take it that your data center is on the network, your users are in the network, and you have firewalls. That worked perfectly fine in the decades where that's where our users were, and that's where our data was, and that's where their devices were. However, as I've just outlined, that's not the case anymore. What happened is we started to pivot with more adoption of cloud and the users being more remote, and the firewall vendors needed to jump on the back of this because they were concerned about this shift in environment, and they virtualized a lot of their devices. So instead of having the firewall kind of inside your network or at the edge of your network, they virtualized those firewalls and moved them to the cloud. However, that only virtualizes the same problem, and I'll talk a little bit about that problem in a few seconds. But basically, that's the same problem, and this is really where SSE comes in and changes this problem. One key thing to take away from this conversation is SSE really is about putting a private firewall on each device. That's the way I like to look at it. So it basically gives granular access to any service or environment that a user needs to access, but protects them, protects their device and protects them. So they can get access to SaaS applications or to the internet or to private applications. But that layer of protection, instead of being the firewall at the end of the network or a cloud-based firewall, it's wrapped around them as an entity. So it means that everything they do is checked and double checked. They get authenticated and authorized to access just the things they need to do their job. Okay. As an example, this is that kind of castle in moat. This is an example of what we see on a daily basis. And a perfect example is my girlfriend. She works for a large UK financial institution, and she works at home 3 days a week and goes in the office 1 day a week and has Fridays off. On the day she's at home, she wakes up in the morning, she turns on her machine, she opens her legacy VPN tool, she connects over the internet into the firewall or VPN concentrator. She then goes through all of these on-prem solutions to then jump onto a VDI box to spend her whole life working in the cloud. She works in a CRM tool that's cloud-based. So she's basically having the latency of going back on-prem, utilizing the bandwidth for the company, going through a whole bunch of on-prem services owned by different manufacturers, different firmware levels, different patch cycles, probably looked after by different teams, to then go back where she started, back to the cloud. Okay, and for me, this doesn't make any sense. In fact, during the pandemic, her company didn't have enough licenses or bandwidth for her to utilize VPN fully, so she was sharing credentials with somebody else. She would work in the mornings, and she would have to authenticate her MFA and give her details to a colleague who worked in the afternoon because, like I said, they didn't have enough licenses or enough bandwidth. And it just feels to me it's a bit crazy to be doing this in the world we live in today, because if you're sat on the internet and you're accessing something on the internet, why do you need to go through all these on-prem services? So really that is resolved by this concept of ZTNA, which makes up part of SSE. So you connect over the internet, you connect into our platform, the applications on premise are connected outwards into our platform, and when the user is authenticated and authorized, you gain access. So all of those tools that used to exist on-prem now exist in the cloud, where the users are, where their devices are, and where most of the services are. Then you go through all of those tools, you're secure, everything passes the test it needs to pass, and then you get given access. So whether that's accessing a SaaS application, or whether it's accessing the internet, or whether it's going on-prem, you go directly to the thing you need. You don't need to add latency or utilize bandwidth, and you're secured. And all of this is based on the concept of zero trust, where you only get access to the things you need to get access to. Okay? This means that you remove those threats of VPN. Okay, so with a VPN, users can move laterally. They go through that VPN pipe, they jump onto the network, and generally they can go everywhere on the network, and that's a risk. ZTNA removes that risk. And also, there's those firewalls or those VPN concentrators are sat on the internet. They're attackable from outside. If you do a quick Google on social media, you'll see that a lot of the very large VPN or firewall vendors have been compromised recently with SSL VPNs, and that is because they're sat there on the internet and they can be compromised, okay? And I know that Jerry's going to talk a little bit about the way we do it differently, but basically we create outbound connections for applications, and therefore there is no inbound ports needed open, so we've removed that risk, okay? This comes out of our VPN risk report. This was 2024. We've got a report coming out in the next couple of weeks for 2025, but this really highlights those things I've just said. People are very, very concerned about legacy VPNs. They're concerned about the risk they bring, both from a lateral movement point of view and from a compromise point of view. They also know that VPNs offer poor experience, and those reasons are because you're adding latency, you're having to send people back on-prem, you're backhauling, and generally because you tend to have VPNs in specific regions. So for instance, I'm UK based. When I go to the US, I still need to traverse all the way over the internet to get into a UK based VPN. And therefore you're adding complexity. And that's what adds to the other issue that you see on the screen is really that complexity around managing VPNs, controlling them, not only from a user perspective, but from an IT and security perspective. I come from a company that was highly acquisitional, and we generally had anywhere between 4 and 10 different VPNs to manage because we had lots of different businesses we were acquiring. And therefore, we actually had a spreadsheet on our intranet that allowed people to understand what VPN tool that they needed to use to get access to which environment. And the irony was you needed a VPN to get to that. Another really good use case is us as a company, HPE Aruba Networking. We're a highly acquisitional company. We are part of an acquisition. Silver Peak was part of an acquisition. Aruba was part of an acquisition. And we've brought in all of our own VPN tools. So when I first joined the company through acquisition, I needed 4 different VPNs to access our HPE tools. We have now migrated ourselves to our own tools, so we are drinking our own champagne. We've migrated to using the ZTNA platform, and therefore we only have 1 tool. We are more than 90,000 users, and we've rolled that out within 4 months. So we are, as I say, drinking our own champagne. Many people say eating their own dog food, but I don't ever want to eat dog food, no matter how good it is. But it just goes to show that a lot of organizations have this VPN risk in place. They definitely have poor user experience. It'll be something people are familiar with. And VPNs are very complex. If you can imagine that they reckon that 95% of organizations will be compromised at some point. Trying to find out where you're compromised if you have 4 different VPNs with users accessing 4 different environments. With all of those tools in play, it's really, really difficult. You really want a simple environment because simplicity really breeds much better security design. So, more statistics. What is driving this SASE adoption? SASE adoption is really being driven by SSE. This is the 2024 results. 57% of people going on the SASE journey were doing it because of SSE. The 2025 results show that 59%, so there's more of an increase on people moving towards SASE being driven by SSE, that security part. That's not to say the networking part's not important, but in the world we live in today with the amount of cyber attacks and ransomware and insider threat, you can understand why the SSE, the security element, is driving this change. And that change is really being driven by ZTNA. So this is, again, 2024. ZTNA was 44% of the reason why people were moving to SSE, with 29% for SWIG and 27% for CASB. Those numbers have pivoted a little bit more, so more people are moving towards that SSE journey because of ZTNA and because of Secure Web Gateway, with CASB being slightly on the decline, with 79% of organizations wanting to adopt SSE in the next 2 years. So that number is changing as well. It's gone from 69% to 79%. So you can really see that people are beginning to understand the power of SASE. They're certainly understanding the power of SSE. But what is driving this adoption is that VPN concern, that VPN risk. Either it's being compromised or the complexities or the poor user experience is really driving this kind of move towards SASE. Okay?
So Jay, so I know Jerry's going to talk a little bit more about the simplicity of managing that net zero trust. Can you spend some more time along with the other deck on how you guys handle the performance aspect of it, right? You said that, you don't have a performance issue with your platform, and because you guys weren't a traditional firewall, you had the blessing of kind of starting with a fresh set of eyes of how to actually build a tool to get users to connect to. They still have on-premise data center stuff. They still have hybrid. They have stuff in Azure. They have a SASE platform they have zero access to. How do you guys stitch all that stuff together for the end users and still have performance to go with it?
Okay, so absolutely. So firstly, I think it's worth pointing out that not all SSE platforms are born equal. You either have the ones that are historic firewall vendors that are pivoting to SSE and SASE, but are still reliant on hardware, still reliant on shipping hardware. Then you have some of the other SSE vendors that have these pillars in a different way. So the key thing for us as a platform is these key pillars that you see on the screen are a single code base, a single UI, single data lake, single management plane completely, okay? Whereas some of the other vendors, maybe they started with Secure Web Gateway because that's where the market was at that point. And then as the market's changed, they've either developed a separate ZTNA platform and they've acquired. So they've actually got different tools for these things. It may well be that they started off as a CASB vendor and then they've pivoted a little bit maybe into ZTNA or Secure Web Gateway. But what we did from the beginning was our founders looked at a specific use case. That use case was third-party and contractor access for those users that are coming from devices that you can't manage. So that also now includes BYOD. So we came up with an agentless offering to give access from those devices, reducing that risk, reducing that attack surface. So you don't need to deploy an agent on the machine. You don't connect them to your network. You give granular access without an agent. Then on top of that, we built a ZTNA tool with an agent to give full agent access and to be able to allow enterprises to replace their corporate VPN. So not only can they replace their third-party access with our agentless offering, they can then continue to roll that out and give them an agent and replace their enterprise VPN. But also on top of that, what we did was we built the rest of this functionality into that single platform. So you can configure access for web with our Secure Web Gateway or SaaS with our Cloud Access Security Broker. And then DEM is the wrapper around that that gives visibility into that single platform. So that's one of the key differentiators. The other one that you kind of mentioned was performance. So we are built on top of the cloud hyperscalers, okay? So we're built on containerization on top of Azure, GCP, AWS, Alibaba. We're built there, which means we don't have to go in, purchase hardware, negotiate data center contracts, and also we can use those hyperscaler networks to accelerate our traffic. So if there's a region in the globe where we don't have a point of presence today, because maybe we don't have any customers, as soon as we get a customer in that region, we can, within a matter of hours, build a point of presence. It also means that as our network scales and our environment scales and we get more users and more devices on the network, if there's any spots where we need to build another point of presence, we can quickly and easily build it. We don't need to purchase hardware, negotiate contracts, deploy that hardware. Also, it means that the agents and the point of presences and the connectors are all connected in a mesh. So that means, in simple terms, that we will always take the fastest possible route from the user and their device to any service they're accessing. And then if anything changes on the network in any way, maybe the internet gets busy or AWS has a problem or Azure has a problem, we'll just pivot to using the next possible fastest route. So I like to explain it simply as it's a bit like GPS. If you're driving from point A to point B and there ends up traffic in the middle, you will just take notice of where you're getting sent with GPS and you'll route around it. So therefore it builds resilience and redundancy into the platform so that if there is any problems, it doesn't matter to us, we'll still take the fastest possible route. I have been asked questions, what happens if we lose all of AWS and all of Azure at the same time? And my honest opinion is probably going to have bigger problems in the world at that point. Okay, but we have lost some point of presence over time. Maybe AWS is doing some work on a weekend and they've taken a data center down. So what we tend to do, like in the UK, we've built points of presence in AWS and Azure. They're very close together. So if we lose one or the other, it just pivots over. And that means for things like GDPR and things like specific regulations, we can keep data sovereignty intact. We can keep data or management in a specific country, tie it to a specific set of POPs. We can also exclude POPs if people wish. We have some other retail customers that may not want to use AWS, so we can exclude those POPs. We can also tie people to specific POPs. We don't recommend you do that because if you tie everyone to a single POP and you lose that POP, you've tied yourself to a problem, but you can if you wish. For instance, when I travel, I like to watch sport on the TV and I must have a UK IP address to do that. I can tie myself to a UK POP to get a UK IP address. I hope, Justin, that answers your question.
It does, yep.
I think the key thing is, and this is feedback that I'm hearing from people that I speak to in the field, is these are the benefits people are saying that SSE gives them. So it's that elimination of the attack surface and giving granular access, unlike legacy VPN. So it's protecting them against ransomware and data loss. It's also enhancing their productivity for them and for their users because it's not as complex to use. You don't have that high latency. You don't have to manage multiple VPNs. You don't need to explain to the users what VPN they need to access what thing. And therefore, whenever they travel, instead of having, like when I go to the US, instead of having to traverse all the way back to the UK to go into a UK VPN, I just dump on a US-based POP, I traverse over the hyperscaler backbone, and I access something in London. So therefore, I rely on that low latency connection rather than a higher latency VPN connection. Also, it's much more simple. You have one tool to manage your ZTNA, your Secure Web Gateway, your CASB. You've got one level of visibility. So therefore, you can be proactive in seeing if there's problems. Our tool will show you if anything's happening on the network that it shouldn't be happening. But also having one tool means you can be much better to be under an investigation. You can see things are happening. You can export everything to a SIEM. You can have your SOC manage alerts. You can then more simply and readily close doors if there happen to be any open and see what's going on. From an Aruba HPE point of view, what we are doing is we are bringing together tools. So we have SSE, the element of the company that I came from. We also have made some acquisitions to expand our SD-WAN offering. So we also have SD-WAN. So if you combine our SD-WAN and our SSE together, we have unified SASE. We are starting to do deeper integrations between these tools. We are starting to blend them into the same management console. We're starting to give visibility. We're starting to be able to control and manage those SD-WANs from SSE and vice versa. Taking it one step further, Gartner's Universal ZTNA. We started to add our ClearPass and our central NAC into the platform as well, starting to integrate those together so that you can truly have one place to go and configure policy. Whether that's from a desktop or a laptop, whether it's from a user or a headless device like IoT and OT, being able to roll that configuration into a single place truly gives that one pane of glass. And I hate the term, I'm sorry to use it, but it really gives you one place to go and configure the access that the users need with that zero trust access. And then if you start to take on board our CX switching and our Wi-Fi and our edge switches, you can start to see that we have a lot of tools in our arsenal. We're starting to bring all these tools together into Aruba Central. That really means that our data lake is growing larger and larger, and we can start to build AI and ML availability around the statistics and being able to notify people if things change. As you can imagine, that's one of the largest data lakes for information in the world. So really consolidating all these tools into one place allows people to really truly understand what is happening in their environment. So being able to notify people, being able to be proactive and let them know if things are changing. Maybe, for instance, I only work from one place on a Monday morning and suddenly my machine appears to be in a completely different place and it's doing something completely different. You would want to know that. You would want to know if I'm suddenly trying to upload terabytes of data. All of those kind of things. Being able to see that, whether it's Wi-Fi or switching or SSE or coming in from the SD-WAN, whether it's our NAC solution, bringing all those statistics together and being able to basically give them to people to monitor and to see is really, really powerful. That wraps up my bit. Justin, I don't know if you've got any questions for me. If not, I will hand over to Jerry and he will demo.
No, well, let's hand over to Jerry and get this demo started.
I will stop sharing and then it's over to you, Jerry.
Great. Thank you, Jay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'm excited to show you this live demo. So what I'm going to show you today is 3 different use cases. I'm going to start with a third-party contractor. And that third-party contractor is not going to have an agent. I'm going to show you the application usage and how they can get to apps and how we can control it in a very granular manner. And then I'm going to show you an employee use case. And that employee use case will also not have an agent. So just a simple web browser getting to very advanced applications behind firewalls in data centers from remote coffee shops or work at home environments. And then I'm also going to show you the agent solution. The agent will be even more advanced and give you full-blown VPN replacement capabilities. So with that, I'm going to start as a demo user or my third-party contractor user logging in. And once I'm logged in, I will then be able to, let me make sure I get my password correct here. Alrighty, there we go. So the third-party contractor, in this case, the demo user, has 3 applications listed at the top. And these applications are very generic. So the only reason I'm showing you Aruba networking is to show you that we're rewriting the URLs. For example, here's a NASA app. You can see the URL getting rewritten at the top here. As we go through different areas of the website, you'll notice the URL changes, but it's still getting rewritten, right? And back to that Aruba. This one is Aruba, and I can basically go through, any of these tabs and get to it. So everything is being controlled and very secure as it's passing through our security cloud as the first hop, and the next hop is going to the application. I'll explain to a minute and how the back end of this works. I'll get a little bit more technical, but for right now, I wanted to keep it high level. So the other thing we can do is other protocols. So not just web, but we can do SSH, we can do clientless SSH. So in this case, I'm using a web browser to get into a backend SSH server. And in the case, maybe a use case might be where your third-party contractor needs to get into a single server to manage something via command line, right? So this is also valuable for if you have a managed service, for example, and a vendor needs to come in and manage your routers and firewalls. In the case of Comport, for example, you could simply deploy a connector inside your environment, and they would be able to do this from end to end. So that's pretty powerful considering it's just a simple web browser. We also have the ability to use a desktop agent of your choice. So maybe you're using a desktop agent called PuTTY, or on Mac, you might be using Terminal, right? So these are some options to go in, again, without installing a client, without installing a SSE agent, you can use your own client to get into those secure shell environments. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a new application, and I'm going to show you how quick and easy it is to add a brand new application. And that application, for example, will be Comport. And so this is our management console. There's plenty of reports, and I can drill down on all of these different areas. I'm going to come back to this in a little bit, but first I want to talk about this new application that I'm going to create for Comport. And so I'll click New Application. I'm going to click Web Hosted App, and then I'm going to give it a name. And so there's something else that we do here that's really, really super simple and unique. And that is we have a built-in IDP. Of course, you can use Ping, Okta, OAuth 2.0, right? So your choice of identity providers. But most importantly is this application tag. So this is where things get really, really simple. So if I create 20 applications and I tag them all with the demo user tag, everybody in that demo user group immediately gets access to that application, right? So imagine this web server is behind a firewall in a data center somewhere, right? So I'm going to commit these changes, and notice back in my portal, I don't see it yet, but within 10 seconds, it's going to pop up, and then I'm going to be able to access that in real time. So that's what we call continuous authorization. And there it is, right? So now I can click on Comport, and it takes me to the Comport website. So again, notice the URL is getting rewritten. This could be behind a firewall, right? This is just an example to make it easy today. I have plenty of others behind. I'm going to show you in a minute behind firewalls. But as I click around and scroll through this website, notice again the URL is getting completely rewritten. And we're doing that all through our cloud environment and protecting the end users and data. Right. So now what's really interesting is I mentioned continuous authorization, right? That application popped up in real time, right? I didn't have to refresh my browser or anything. I can also take it away in real time. In other words, I can remove and revoke access for that user in real time. So if I go over to my Comport app and I disable it simply by clicking that little button, I'm going to apply changes. I go back to my portal. I can still see it there, but within 10 seconds, this will disappear.
You're not hitting refresh. That's literally just coming and going as the administrator makes the changes, right? So you're not asking the customer to reboot, relog in, just give it 10 seconds and your changes apply, right?
That's exactly right. It's continuously authorizing and checking to see if you have access. So now that I don't have access, if I go back to my page that was previously opened and I try to go to any one of these links, I get a 404 error, page not found message, right? So it's very, very secure, and we're able to lock down private applications in real time, very, very rapidly and quickly. So one of our claims to fame is our ease of use. Our management console is extremely easy to use and very, very powerful, right? So what I'd like to do now is switch gears and move away from the third-party contractor to the advanced power user. So I'm going to log out now and log back in as myself as a power user. I have a completely different portal and a completely different set of applications. So for example, I've got an RDP application, a Windows environment. I can click on this and I can get to my Windows virtual server in the data center over a web browser, right? So imagine a jump server, you know, you need to get to anything in your environment. You can do that simply from this particular jump server or Windows 10 server, or even a Windows server or RDS, remote desktop services environments, or virtual environments. There's a lot of options there in RDP, right? The next one I'll show is a private IP. So this happens to be a private SD-WAN orchestrator. And for example, our Edge Connect product as a orchestrator, we have an on-prem version of it. That is this. So it's a private IP that I'm reaching through the SSE cloud. Again, notice the URL is getting rewritten, and everything I do on this particular solution is protected through my SSE cloud. Another example might be a vCenter server. For example, let's say I'm the IT administrator and I need to manage my infrastructure on the back end. Maybe I need to change some storage, compute, or manage virtual machines. I can do that as well. Another example is a single application like Adobe Photoshop Express. Right, so earlier I logged into this Windows 10 RDP machine. Well, what if I could just launch a single application on that machine? As a third-party contractor, this could be very valuable, right? So if I log into this, I have a couple ways to log in, right? I can force the end user to authenticate, or I can provide credentials in advance on the application definition. The benefit of that is the end user would have no idea what the real user credentials are. So if I needed to revoke access in the future, that end user would never know what the original credentials were. So in this case, now I've got Adobe Photoshop Express running. I can edit my artwork. Let's say I'm working for an advertising agency and I'm doing some covers for some magazines, for example. I could edit that. I could create that and save that and send it to my employer, and I'm done. So that's back to the third-party contractor use case without an agent. All right, so pretty powerful all around. So far, we've done everything with a single web browser. Imagine you're having a holiday dinner at one of your relatives' house, and you get a call from work, and you got to log in, do something for a report. You could do that with anybody's web browser. You can go and sit down on their laptop or their desktop, log in with your credentials, two-party authentication, two-factor authentication, and then get right into your job. So very, very powerful from that perspective. So let's see, that covers the power user use case without an agent. Now let's switch gears and log into the agent. So I'm going to log in, and in this case, I've set up my IDP, my built-in IDP. I also have Okta as a choice and Azure Entra ID as a choice. I'm going to choose Access, and I'm going to authenticate with my account. And then the agent establishes a connection, and it downloads the profile and policies from the management console. So again, it's continuous authorization, and it's updated in real time. So now if I go back to, remember that orchestrator that I was logged into earlier, what I'm going to do in this case is, instead of logging in and getting that URL rewritten through the portal, I'm going to go direct. And I happen to have a bookmark up here, and that takes me directly to the IP address, as if I were on a old-fashioned legacy VPN, with the difference being that I've restricted, I've controlled access granularly in a much more secure way than I would have otherwise. What that looks at like from a policy perspective is it's really an application. It's an application called Labs, Big Security Lab IP range. So if I go in and take a quick look at what I've done, for all the technical people in the audience, you'll see this is an IP address range. This is a private range that you would normally have behind a firewall in a data center, or it could be a cloud environment, right? As long as it's protected and hidden behind a firewall, this makes it reachable to me when I'm running the agent, no matter where I am, anywhere in the world. And one of the most important things, again, I mentioned this earlier, are the application tags. These tags really simplify the configuration of the policies and the applications. And then the second step, so first step is to create the application and the tag. The second step is to create the rule, right? So in this case, I've got a rule that basically says, if I'm a user, a power user, and I'm running the agent's on, the firewall's on, then I'm going to be able to get to my applications that are tagged, right? Remember that lab IP range that I just showed you? That was tagged. Well, this is the tag that I put in this rule. So it's a very, very simple, easy to manage solution. I've got another rule here called block gambling. So while the agent is running, I can actually enforce this. So if I go to gambling, access to this page has been blocked. So it's very, very, easy to configure and very powerful. This is a secure web gateway policy. So far, everything else has been zero trust, right? So that low-hanging fruit in security is replacing the old-fashioned legacy VPN concentrator. And so what we've done is we replaced it with 100% software, security in the cloud, and then easy to manage and control all access. So then that takes me to the dashboard and some of the reporting capabilities that we have built in. So for example, here are some of the user activities, graphs and charts. I've got some other, applications. These are private applications, right, that have access. If I wanted to drill down, let's say for Photoshop, for example, I could drill down and it filters and brings up a very granular report called exploration. So each one of these are a single flow, and this is my source IP, my public IP. This is my username. Obviously, this is RDP, this is the protocol, and then some other detail about the application match and rule match, and so on and so forth, right? So very, very granular reporting capabilities built in. So with that, are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, you can either type in the chat, or you can, if you can attempt to come off mute, feel free to ask any questions away. Did you have anything else you want to demo, Jerry, or is that everything you want to cover?
That's it for now.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, assuming there's no questions, thank you very much, Jerry, for your demo. No issues there. Everything worked great. So, a couple kind of key things that I saw and heard were, we talked about performance with Jay. It's a multi-public cloud, back end, right? So if AWS having issues, Azure's having issues, Oracle's having issues, it can circumvent down to individual POP. Super easy for the administrator with those tags to be able to identify what role that end user should have, what tools they should have access to. Imagine if you're a company doing, like Jay mentioned, some acquisitions where, hey, we're going to acquire this company, we're going to pop in a your gateway inside their data center attached to their public clouds, and we can give all of the legacy organization access to the tools they need inside that company they did an acquisition with within a few hours of work, versus handing over a new set of keys and giving documentation on how to log in with that traditional VPN client and having access to that. So way simpler and faster to deploy. And it's full layer 7 application security for those end users, not just relying on your EDR anymore. You have your EDR, whatever choices you made there, plus this Atmos platform to really kind of secure, like we showed, blocking gambling, those kind of things. So a lot of capabilities inside this platform outside of just, it's not just one function. There's a lot of functions inside there. So with that, I think we'll close it up. Final thoughts I have is, if anyone is seeing this before Discover of 2025, Jay and I will both be at Discover. So we can find some time to sit down and chat or do some executive briefings on this topic or other topics. If you want to do a deep dive demo with Jerry and go through some examples you may have that are outside of the kind of a canned demo that we did today, we can do that. Or do a POC and actually kind of deploy it in your environment and see how easy it is to truly use the tool. Reach out to anyone on this call or your Comport account director, reply back to emails, find us on LinkedIn. We're here to help.
Thank you very much, Justin. Thank you, Jerry, for doing the demo dance.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for joining us today.
Thank you all.